This has to be one of the dumbest 18 plus ratings I've seen when it comes to gaming. Because today we need to talk about Balatro that's currently calling out PEGI. PEGI is a game rating agency that's responsible for rating the games somewhere like in Europe. They gave Balatro an 18 plus rating for the fact that there's poker in the game. There's no microtransactions, there's no loot boxes or booster packs that you pay for in order to get like the best cards or anything. PEGI is just only giving them an 18 plus rating because it's poker. So today we're going to be talking a little more about that because the Balatro dev, known as Local Thunk, had some things to say about that call that PEGI made. So let's check in on that. So for those that don't know, Balatro is a roguelike deck building game that takes some basic concepts of poker into the mix. You basically have a score you have to meet that's represented as chips, and you play your poker hands, and these poker hands give you the score, the chips, the multiplier, and everything. And the stronger the hand, the more points you get, and if you beat that score, you advance to the next round, and that's basically it. But along the way, you're actually building your deck at the same time with a multitude of cards like jokers, planet, and tarot cards, all the way you get to the final boss, and then there's like an endless mode and things like that. Balatro is a very popular game. It was just recently nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards, which is quite an accomplishment for a game that was developed by one person. And now you have Balatro that's just being slapped with an 18 plus rating because poker. That's it. If we look at what PEGI had to say, PEGI's rating for Balatro very directly cites the game's use for poker mechanics as a problem, stating that it, unquote, teaches by the way of images, information, and gameplay, skills and knowledge that are used in poker. This knowledge and skill could be transferred to a real-life game of poker. So then you have Local Thunk on Twitter that responded, since PEGI gave us an 18 plus rating for having evil playing cards, maybe I should add microtransactions, loot boxes, and real gambling to lower the rating to 3 plus like EA Sports FC, which is a game that we're going to be talking about shortly. So Local Thunk is basically calling out a double standard, and he is pretty valid in this argument. You have FC, FIFA, or we'll just call it EA Sports FC, that is implementing microtransactions or booster packs for your ultimate team so that you have a probability of getting a top tier player in your ultimate team like Messi, for instance. And you have kids that spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars into these games. It's the reason why the franchise is very successful to begin with. Had it not been for microtransactions, FC probably wouldn't be making a fraction of the money that they usually make. But here we are. So basically, Local Thunk is saying it's kind of crazy that you have a game that's rated 3 plus, and it's a place where people can actually spend money for a probability of getting these characters for their team. But then when you have Balatro that teaches the very basics of poker, suddenly it gets slapped across the face with an 18 plus rating from PEGI. I don't think the Balatro dev is arguing that, hey, if EA Sports is a 3 plus game, I should be a 3 plus game too. I don't think that's the argument there. The argument is that, okay, it's fine if I'm an 18 plus game, but you need to keep that same energy when you have games like EA Sports FC that's doing these things, or Genshin Impact that's doing these things. Because there's many other games out there that involve real life gambling. You're spending money for cosmetics and characters and weapons and things of that nature, and you're spending it in the hopes that you get this specific item, and you don't get it, and you lose that money forever. Whereas in Balatro, that's not the case. The only money that you're spending is just buying the game. That's really it. I do want to look deeper into what PEGI had to say about the game because the article kind of glossed over it a little bit. And I just wanted to break it down a little bit because I myself have played Balatro. So I'm going to tell you exactly what goes on and what PEGI is talking about when they describe the game. So at the top, it says that this game teaches by way of images, information, and gameplay, skills and knowledge that are used in poker. During gameplay, the player is rewarded with chips for playing certain cards. Do you want to know what exactly those chips are? It's literally the score. That's it. If you look at the right where it says round score, you play your hands and you get a score, or basically chips. And at the top with the red numbers, it says score at least 4,200. That's a score that you have to beat to advance to the next round. That's it. it's really just score. They just threw in chips and make it seem as if like, oh, like you get rewarded chips. And I think when people read rewarded chips, they think like, oh, it's chips that you actually keep and then you can gamble it or spend it somewhere else for a chance to get something of like higher value or whatever. But it's really just a score. And Peggy doesn't even mention that. Then we continue with Peggy's description of the game, saying that the player is able to access a list of poker hand names. As the player hovers over these poker hands, the game explains what types of cards the player would need in order to play certain hands. As the game goes on, the player becomes increasingly familiar with which hand would earn more points. Because these are hands that exist in real world, this knowledge and skill could be transferred to a real-life game of poker. This is what they're talking about. That's really it. You have your straight flush, you have your poker hands. Yes, these are real life poker hands that you can play. But the thing that's really dumb about that, what they don't explain, is that there's a leveling system. So I can basically build a deck, for instance, because again, this is a deck building game, a roguelike deck building game, where I can have a deck where all I do is just play 2 pairs. And the 2 pair could be the most dominant poker hand that I play in my deck. Now, that's not true in real life. A 2 pair is a 2 pair. A straight flush basically trumps every single ranking poker hand that you play. And so it doesn't make sense that Peggy just looked at poker hands and say, oh, you're teaching kids about poker hands? Oh, okay, this is a step too far. This is an 18+ game. End of discussion. That is final. Not to mention, I did say things like tarot cards, joker cards, things of that nature. These are the tarot cards that you also play with that can manipulate your deck building. You also have planet cards as well, which also strengthens the scoring of your poker hand. And finally, you have jokers that if you utilize them correctly, they can actually give you more points and can actually bend the rules a bit when it comes to the game. So yeah, this game teaches me poker. I'm gonna go to Las Vegas. I'm gonna bring out a deck of playing cards that's gonna have jokers and tarot cards and planet cards, and I'm gonna flush the house clean. And then you're gonna have like the card dealer that's gonna sit there and be like, sir, what are you doing? What do you do? What are these cards? This is a poker table. What are you doing? Oh, this is poker? Oh, you haven't learned anything about poker yet. I'll show you poker. Like, it just makes no sense to me at all. It's literally the basic knowledge of poker. But other than the poker hands, that's really it. There's really nothing else to it. You're not gambling. You're not spending real life currency in hopes of getting like a better joker card that you can play with. It's just a deck building game. That's it. You don't deck build when it comes to poker. So I don't understand how anyone could play this game and think that, oh, I know a thing or two about poker. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. And the only thing that you know is poker hands. Like, it takes a lot more than poker hands to know how to play poker. And as I was looking at the website for Peggy, I was looking at the Balatro rating, and it's funny how on the left, you see that the most searched games is EA Sports FC 25, which is absolutely crazy. Again, EA Sports FC 25 is the same game where you can open packs, you can spend real life currency for a probability of getting players into your ultimate team. And mind you, there are several other games that Local Thunk would probably mention, like Genshin Impact, for instance, where Genshin Impact has a 12+ rating. And if you look at Peggy's website, you can see on the top right hand corner that there's in-game purchases, which I find to be very vague because in-game purchases can mean anything. You can say in-game purchases could be in-game currency, but it could also be real life currency that you can spend in those games as well. So for those that don't know, Genshin Impact is a very popular gacha game. The name gacha comes from gachapon. I think that's how you pronounce it. I apologize if I butcher it. But yeah, it's like these little machines that you put your coins in and you spin the knob and you get a random, trinket or character or toy that you may or may not want. You have Genshin Impact where there's certain events, banners, things of that nature, where you spend these things called wishes, and you can spend an X amount of wishes for the same amount of rolls or pulls or whatever you want to call it. And when you spend those wishes, like any other gacha game or any other game that uses gambling as some form of mechanic, you do have a probability of getting a weapon or a character that you want. So, whether you may agree or may not agree with the fact that Balatro should be an 18 plus game for the fact that the game flirts with the idea of poker just because they mention a whole set of poker hands that could transfer to real life gambling, we do need to look back at the fact that you do have a lot of researchers that are looking into gambling when it comes to video games. And it's not a foreign conversation to have when we speak on loot boxes and booster packs and how games like Overwatch, at least part 1 Overwatch, and FIFA were the main focus when it came to gambling. Speaking at the panel during the FTC's recent workshop on the video game loot boxes, York St. John University research Dr. David Zendel stated unequivocally that loot boxes are connected to problem gambling. As reported by Games Industry, Zendel acknowledged that the casual relationship between the two isn't clear, but said that the connections is a clear cause for concern that should not be trivialized. Spending money on loot boxes is linked to problem gambling. The more money people spend on loot boxes, the more severe these problem gambling is. This isn't just my research. This is an effect that has been replicated numerous times across the world by multiple independent labs. This is something the game industry does not engage with. Again, we can't act brand new when it comes to this. Gambling has been a topic in the gaming industry for quite some time. And a lot of times when people talk about gambling, they're not talking about learning how to play blackjack or learning how to play poker. A lot of times when people talk about gambling in video games, we're talking about loot boxes, we're talking about booster packs, we're talking about several other things that involves you spending real life money, taking money out of your debit or your credit card or whatever, your gift card, and spending it in a certain mechanic that there's a probability that the skin or the character or the weapon that you want may appear or may not appear for you to obtain at all. It is literal gambling. The reason why this rating is so silly and dumb is because you don't spend a single dime in Balatro. If you lose, that's it. You don't, it's not like I just broke my bank account into two just because I lost a game of Balatro. You just play your hands, you hit a score, you advance to the next round, and if you don't, you lose. Better luck next time. You want to play again? And by the way, I will definitely say Balatro is an amazing game. It was nominated for Game of the Year. I played it myself. I got it the first time when I upgraded my iPhone, and I loved the game so much, I eventually bought it on Steam for like $10, $13. It's an amazing game. I definitely recommend y'all play it, but I don't think y'all should take Peggy's word as to what the game is about, because they're using a lot of words that kind of skews people's perspective on the game. Like they mentioned, you get rewarded chips. Reward could mean anything. When you play the game, it's not chips that you're rewarded, it's just a score. They might as well say, hey, these chips are represented as a score, but they didn't. They just said, oh, you just get rewarded chips. And oh, by the way, there's poker hands in there, so that could translate to real life gambling, so we're giving this an 18 plus rating. It's really dumb to me. Vogelthunk doesn't care that the game is 18 plus. He really doesn't care. And who knows, maybe Balatro will have more space or room to actually come up with some crazy ass card effects. I saw a comment somewhere where they said like they might as well take advantage of this rating and take like a Joker card that says fuck Peggy, where you get like 18 plus added to your multiplier and 18 plus chips added into your score. Or I'm sorry, you get rewarded 18 plus chips. But other than that, that's really about it. Again, I recommend the game. It's amazing. You can get it on Steam or anywhere else for maybe like $10 to $15. I really recommend it. And until then, that's about it. Peace.